Well, thank you, Marla, so much for being willing to be a part of this pilot project, so to speak, or passion project of mine. I'm always coming up with harebrained ideas, but felt it was really important to continue this campaign of increasing awareness and decreasing stigma around sugar addiction, food addiction, whatever label we're putting on it, and recovery. And I'm just so glad you reached out and you wanted to do this again. For anybody who doesn't know Marla, I'm gonna have her introduce herself here in a minute, but if you want a longer version of her story, we did interview her for the Food Junkies Summit last year. So you can find that interview at foodjunkiespodcast.com. She also shared a bit of her story for Hope Week this year in our courses that we were running, Clarissa and I, and those videos have already been posted as well. So be sure to look for longer versions or more of Marla. But I'll stop talking now and let Marla introduce herself. And if you would, Marla, the Coles Notes or Cliff's Notes version of your story, because then I want to talk to you about what recovery is like today versus when you started this journey 5.5, 6 years ago, however long ago you realized something just wasn't right.
Sure. Hi, my name is Marla, and I am a person in recovery. That is one thing that's changing. I am no longer wanting to identify as I do have food addiction. I do have food addiction, but I am now identifying in every meeting that I go to, which are mostly recovery meetings, not, hi, my name is Marla, I'm an alcoholic, but that is not my story. I'm not an alcoholic. I have issues with food, and now it's morphed to, it was food addiction for me, and now it's mental health / food addiction, because now I know better, right? We don't know what we don't know. So very quickly, I was overweight. Probably, I think at 5 years old, I started getting chubby, and at 5 years old, I knew I was different. I knew my family was different, and I started developing a desire to eat, to stuff my feelings because I didn't get what I needed. And you can see my little pudgy hands grabbing at all the food, all our vacations as a child. I can tell you everything about the food, where we were, whether it was Cape Cod or Connecticut or whatever it was all about the food. Being Canadian, we didn't have blow pops here, went to Connecticut, discovered blow pops, and, came home with boxes, and they were gone. They, that started my story with food. In 1980, I went to Israel to find myself, like, not just Jewish kids, but, we go to Israel to find ourselves, whatever that means, to live on a kibbutz. And I discovered a lot of things there, sex and drugs and rock and roll, things I've never, done before. I left Montreal, a little princess who never did anything, leather pants, $400 sweaters, a car to the candy store, to never walked anywhere. So living a life of pure enjoyment and freedom, and I guess maybe a little bit of escape from the regular. Lost weight, of course, and then I was there for 9 months, and then flew to New York to be with my brother for his graduation from university. We went out for an incredible dinner. I was 21, I guess. I was 20. I was to be 21. We went out for this amazing dinner. I was not used to eating food, heavy steaks, lobsters all together one time, and I discovered my magic. I went to the bathroom and I purged, and I came back to the table and I started to eat, and I went, wow, I threw up. I can actually finish all this food now. And I thought it was the greatest gift, right? Like, I thought this will, and 1981, and this continued until 2000 and almost 13. Fast forward from that my life, my compulsion with food, my need for food to fill all the emptiness inside of me, just morphed. It just, when people say that addiction of any kind is progressive, it's not a joke. It got really, really bad in my early to mid 30s. And then from there, it just took off. Like there was no way I couldn't do anything. I mean, I tried everything. I tried, pay and ways. I tried uh, restriction. I tried 700 calories. I tried everything. And it didn't matter what I did. So at one point I decided I'm just going to accept myself as I am. I'm fat, started looking into Big, Bold and Beautiful, which was a modeling thing here in Toronto for big women. And I just abandoned any hope of ever having a normal relationship with food, or with myself, right? I mean, but the food really, the need for it destroyed my life, robbed me of everything, of self-compassion, self-love, self-respect, mostly self-respect. I mean, I did things that I'm not proud of. I was just a horrible person, but food was my lover. Food was my lover. From a young age, everyone would be out on dates. I would be on my sofa dating my bags of whatever. Up and down, lost weight, gained weight, lost weight, gained weight. Had my first spinal surgery in, I was going to say 1981. And I ended up having to have another one in 2009, which was a super big one. And I had just decided, like, that was the last time I really dieted. Just before that, I had done I kind of like a keto, but, I'm going to say dirty keto, where all the sweetenered, all the treats with sweeteners in them were allowed and opted for. So again, that was for me. If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It doesn't matter that it's a healthy version. Had my back surgery, kept some of the weight that I lost off. And about 2 years later, but still, still this craziness in my head, monkey brain, the stories I would tell myself when anything triggered me. And of course, it wasn't me, it was you, it was them, it was she, it was he, it was how they spoke to me, how they talked to me. It was triggered because it sounded like something my mother had said, or that tone, or that, with all my with what I know now, I understand so much better, which we'll get into after. But I remember, I came back from, I had gone on vacation, and I came back, and I was talking to a client of ours, I think it was, my timeline is, and she said, she said, a friend of mine had gastric bypass surgery. She says, but I'm afraid to have it. And I said, oh God, I would love to have it. I remembered that my mom's friend had it. I was 12 years old, and I remember going to see her, visit her at the Montreal, at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal. And I mean, you want to talk about stomach stapling. I mean, her scar went from, just below her boobs all the way down, and it was stapled, literally, or I don't know. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. I want to have that at 12 years old. This was, and over the years, it's not something that I, obsessed over, but it was something that I always went back to visit, not constantly, but when things got too much, I went, God, I would love to have that. So when this client was telling me about, now in Ontario, if you qualify, you can get it done for free. And the qualifications where you had to, if you didn't have any comorbidities, like any other health issues, your BMI had to be, I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what it was, but and I thought about it, and then of course it was a no-brainer, right? Because I'm like, if there's a surgery or a pill, sign me up, because I don't want to do the work. That's just my nature. I called my doctor and I said, would you go, onto the website and fill out all this information? And he said, I can, and he did. And he got back to me a couple of weeks later saying that he heard back from them and I didn't qualify. My BMI was too low. And I literally said to him, what weight did you put? And he goes, well, the weight from your last. I said, what was it? And I said, well, I've gained some weight since then. He goes, I said, but give me 2 weeks. Just give me 2 weeks and I'll come in and you can weigh me. And I literally ate. Like I ate myself up to be able to qualify for gastric bypass surgery. It wasn't a lot, but it was like I had to move 1 or 2 points on the BMI index. And I had no problem. 2 weeks. That was all it took. Totally dishonest, went through the whole thing, lied about my purging, because I was still doing it. Not as much, of course, but I just wanted to do this. I had no regard for, the mental health aspect of it, what it can do to me, just thinking that, of course, this was my cure, right? This is going to be my cure. So I had my surgery. And I was literally a poster child. It was June of 2012. I mean, I was considered a lightweight by the Bariatric Society, but I was a poster child. Really, my weight came off. I kept it off all but maybe, I don't know, 15 pounds over the 4.5, 5 years. But in the 4.5, 5th year, I realized, first of all, I realized 2 things. I pushed the limits and started eating, junk food again, which everyone says don't do. But of course, having an addiction to these things and not knowing that the food had very little to do with anything, I was still maintaining my weight. I was not, if anyone knows anything about gastric bypass surgery, I was not, I didn't dump. I could eat what I wanted. And I would get the foamies, if any of you know that, if I ate too much dense protein or drank when I ate, but I could eat huge amounts of like frozen yogurt and kind of junk food, lighter food. And then life was just unbearable. I mean, it got, I guess the emotional part of it got that much worse. And then the eating was just, nonstop, just like it was before. I was maintaining my weight loss for the most part. And then we had a support group. Someone said to me, we were talking, the tears and everything. There's this amazing doctor in Toronto, and there's this pilot project going on for food addiction. You should call for an appointment. And I was like, I'm not a food addict. I'm not a food addict. I never identified as a food addict. I like to eat. I was fat. That's what I told myself. I'm just fat. I like to eat. It just makes me happy. I love food. I love food. So I called this number and I was on the phone with someone for about an hour and a half. And the questions, they just kept coming. And I just was honest as I could be. And at the end of the conversation, she said to me, well, she goes, you are an end stage food addict. And we would be more than happy to invite you to come and participate in the 3-week in-house program. And this program was brought to fruition by none other than Vera Tarman, Dr. Vera Tarman, who is the addictions director of Renaissance for drugs and alcohol. And being as passionate as she is, she got someone to do a pilot project. I got the time off work. I went in from the day I walked through those doors, September 12th, 2016. I can say to you today that I have not touched flour, sugar, wheat, grains. I have not. The day I left there, I went back to sweeteners and artificial crap and pushed the boundaries with my fruit. And it's not been linear, but it's what a whole different way of living. But we had to go to meetings and 12-step meetings, and so began my career as a 12-stepper. So what I want to move to now is, a couple of things is the difference. My path, this is my path. Recovery was one way. There's only one way. It's 12 steps. It's working. I mean, for the most part, that's what everyone knew, right? And I'm not bashing the 12 steps. I'm not bashing AA or OA or whatever anonymous there is. I need for right now a balance of both, but I've stopped going to 12-step meetings because I get very triggered. And that has happened since I met people like Molly and Clarissa and that new, it's like a new way of recovery. It's learning about ourselves, why we do the things we do, why we think the way we think, how to maybe find ways to cope rather than, for me, if you say to me, like I have, issues at work, which is where a lot of my issues are. Well, did you take it through the did you take it through the steps? Yeah, I'm selfish, I'm dishonest, I have a resentment, I'm fearful all the time, right? And this was me for about 4 years in program, was the self-deprecate. I mean, it works sometimes, but for someone who has zero sense of self and zero confidence and zero self-compassion, love, respect, who believes they're worthy or of anything good, to constantly have to do, if anyone knows, a 10-step turnaround during the course of the day, which is, where's my resentment? Okay, where was I dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, and fearful? Well, I can tell everyone here, and I'm not going to swear, that every single day, there's somewhere where I'm selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and fearful. Fear controls my life, but I'm learning how to handle it. Yeah, what's that new expression? I'm a fast forgetter and a slow learner. Or I'm not so much a slow learner as I am a very fast forgetter of what works, what doesn't work. I've had no desire to do a real big 10th step until yesterday, when something happened, and I knew that in this situation I needed to take it through this, because I woke up with monkey brain this morning, and I knew I need to do some writing. And it could turn into nothing, but so recovery for me now is, I'm just going to put this out there for the whole world to hear. I've been on SSRIs for 31 years for depression, anxiety, 31 years. That's literally half my life, literally half of my life. And I'm not going to say they didn't help. I'm going to say they kept me. I mean, I still had huge ups and downs, but I didn't rise above what my baseline was ever. Like, I never remember enjoying things, like really enjoying or having many moments of just peace and stillness in here, and being able to feel my emotions. And I mean, I can't even name emotions. Oh, happy, sad, angry, joy. Fear, is fear an emotion? I don't know, but that's it. I don't identify. I don't know what they are, right? But when I feel them, they would surface. I would have some tears, or I'd throw a tantrum. But I didn't. Same thing growing up. I had no idea what to do with them, right? So it was just be miserable and isolate and not be part of. And in the last year and a half, I guess, 2 years, I don't remember when I met Molly and started doing your workshops and your groups, but whenever that was, I started learning that there is a different way to go about recovery, because it's not about the food, it's not about the alcohol, it's not about the drugs, the sex, the gambling. I don't believe it is until it is. But it's about what's here. It's about trauma. It's about what I did to cope, what I became, what happened to me. Nothing horrific. I mean, I don't want to say I'm a survivor, thank God, of what I think are horrific, but I suffered a great deal of emotional and emotional trauma, or lack of emotional support, upbringing, guidance, because I had two very unavailable parents who were in their own addictions. And so growing up with being a sensitive child and a child and you know, who needed love and craved love, or maybe the craving and needing it, I mean, we all need it, you know, was never met. And so I developed my own skills, my own skill set, right? I love to quote Russell Brand, who says, you know, we need to learn, I'm going to swear once, we need to learn how to be who we were before we got fucked up by the world or life, and how we came to. And I didn't know these were coping mechanisms, right? I didn't know that these were things that I was trying to do to protect myself, or that my body now knows to do to protect myself. So as I got more active in you know, in just recovery rooms and sweet sobriety and Molly's meetings and the workshops, you know, I ego and pride. That's me. I filled with ego and pride, right? Because I know it all, because I'm in 12 steps and these people are just starting out, and I know better because I haven't touched my trigger foods and what's wrong with you people. And you know, I'm going to be honest when I'm going to be honest, and I'm not going to be honest when I don't want to be, because I don't want to do the work. And, you know, I always feel shame and bad, and I'm not enough. And so in order to be enough, I'm just going to tell things, or I'm just going to not participate because I don't need to, right? I'm okay the way I am. And it's that bravado, it's that false sense of I'm okay, or the need for people to think I'm okay, because that's just how I always had to be. And so in December, I went off my SSRIs because a childhood friend told me about a new path of recovery that she was on. And Molly just give me a nod if I can talk about it or not. She told me, you know, a new path of recovery that she's on, and it's something that's been coming up more and more. And so I spoke to my therapist, and I spoke to my GP and my counselor, and I said, what do you think about this idea? And my therapist and my counselor were like, right on, you know, go for it, try it, right? And my doctor was, okay, we can start taking you off your medication. And so I got off my medication, and it was 4 months of pure hell, pure hell. It was horrific. I've never experienced anything so painful in my life. And now I had, not only didn't I have food to cope with it, but I had no medication in me, and I didn't know. And it wasn't so much the feelings as it was the resurgence of my anxiety. It was, I completely forgot what my anxiety was like pre-medication. And it came back with a force so powerful. It really, like it really, I didn't think I didn't want to go back on medication. Medication is good for people. It helps you. But I'm just at a point in my life where I want to do more than just exist, right? I want to live life. But I'm still not living life because I'm thinking I'm all that. I've got this shit together. I've got my shit together, and I get caught in between that 12-step world and the self-love, self-compassion, recovery way of life. And that's what I call it, right? The sense of self, I think, almost. And it's, you know, there's a lot of talk about shadow work, which I don't really understand, but it's there. You know, it's the things that I do to cope, and it's going to always be there. But again, it's learning how these strategies. So I delved into the dark side, and I am doing psychedelic assisted therapy. And it's not, again, it's not a panacea. It's not going to cure you. It's not going to make you happy and joyful and free. You need to do the work. Being who I am, I think I'm not doing the work as always. But what's amazing is sweet sobriety has, or Molly, you know, you do these 10-week workshops, and you have the, the WhatsApp group. And it's not that I think I'm too good for that. It's just too busy for me. It's just so busy for me. But when I was asked to speak and share at Hope Week, I was, as you know, I was in a downward, I was not in a good place. And I went into the first night and then the second night so raw and vulnerable. And it was probably the first time I was able to just let everything go and admit to myself and to the people in those rooms who are only in there for 7 months, 6 months, 3 months, 10 months, to admit to them that they have humbled me, because their path, their beginnings of recovery are so different than mine. Mine were so, that fundamentalist way of thinking that there's only one way. And for me, it just perpetuated the shame and the guilt and the shame, really the shame. And I can now say, I don't know how long ago it was, a few weeks ago, but things started shifting for me so much since sharing at Hope Week. And just watch it. I mean, it's way too much for me, but I have made connections with people I never saw in a meeting before. I am so open now to just being there for people. I still don't know what I have to offer anyone. I mean, I know I have a very long way to go, but I know, and I'm very, very, very verklempt when I actually can say, so I've been in recovery for a long time. I had my gastric bypass in 2012. That was one part of my recovery. And then Renaissance was another part of my recovery. 12 steps were a different part of my recovery. But I can honestly say, hand to heart, that my emotional sobriety, my emotional recovery started when I started working with you and Clarissa, with Molly and Clarissa. And that's my truth. I mean, the food is the food, right? But it's like a white knuckling alcoholic, right? You stop drinking, but you still don't know what to do with all the shit that's in here. It's decades. And even though you think you've dealt with it, it's never dealt with, because I've never changed the way I can't change what happened. I can't change my first thought, my first reaction. And, I do know that I can change what comes after that. I don't always, because I don't have the self-confidence or I don't believe in myself. What I do take hugely from 12 steps is there has to be, it's all spiritual for me. And I'm struggling with having, being spiritually fit, as they like to say, or having a connection. And I know that when I'm not, my life will very quickly go downhill. I was walking the other morning and I just used my voice memo on my phone, and I actually I had a meltdown, and I was just screaming into my phone, talking to God, and then just kind of, I don't know what happened, but I just kind of lost it and said, it's the unmanageability. So when the big book talks about step 1 is I am powerless over whatever is controlling me. If you want to go to recovery dharma, it's my addiction has me versus I have my addiction, right? So I'm powerless right now. My addiction has me, this part of me. And my life is unmanageable right now. Not constantly, but I think that's what made me really decide to, pull up my bootstraps and know I needed to do an actual inventory, a 12-stepping inventory over what happened this week. But, and the unmanageability for me is when I lose my ability to pause. That for me is, when I used to hear my life is unmanageable, I go, well, hell no, I pay my rent, I'm responsible, I have a job, no, that has, the unmanageability is what's going on in here and in here. And, I laugh at some of I call them the new girls on the block in your, in Sweet Sobriety. And there's one that I speak with quite often. And and a couple of them actually, and they're so fresh and they're so new and they're going, well, just do this, just stop, just go back to basics. And I'm like, I love them. And I actually said, it makes sense, but at this point, after 6 years, coming up on 6 years, you don't just go back to basics. It's just not how I'm wired, right? It's that whole push-pull. It's that whole thing that's going on in me. It's that whole fighting between what's right, what I know is right, what I don't want to let go of, what I know I need to let go of, what I can't let go of, what I know I need help with, and just not being everywhere yet, not being there in every place yet. And when people used to say to me, oh, it's slow going, and I'm like, oh, slow is it? It's like, but I mean, I only started when I was 54, well, whatever, 50, let's say 54. I mean, like I said, my real recovery only started when I started working with you. Like for me, the most important thing is the emotional sobriety.
Yeah, so
Because
you dropped from here into here, right? And so this is the life work. This is the hard stuff. And I can so relate when you say it, like, okay, it's beautiful that these folks are showing up and they're trying to support you, because so often, Marla, it's so funny. I'll be talking to somebody and they'll be like, oh, Marla, this and Marla, that. Like, people all over the world talk to you and you help them. And so it's just, I love that somebody was trying to support you. Yes, they do. And somebody was trying to support you and they say, oh, go back to basics. But the basics worked when the basics worked, because that's when it was about the food, but it's no longer about the food. And so it's like, no, you have to dig deeper, because it's not the food. It's not the green beans that's driving you back into like grazing as you're cooking. There's something else going on. Yeah.
I have goosebumps. First of all, I think you just you just blew my mind by what you said about people, saying that I help them, especially all over the world. But it's so true, that it's not about the food. There's still that, when I used to hear, the hole in my soul, and like, what does that even mean? Right. But it is. And I'm going to be 62 in a few months. And I've been alone for quite a while. I lived with someone for 14 years, but it was a relationship, I would say toxic, because I didn't deserve better. I didn't want, he's a wonderful man. We're friends today. But I deserve much better. But now I'm at the point where, am I going to even ever have a life? Is that, my Molly knows, and it's like, my thing is, a lot of my sadness is I'm alone. I feel lonely. I need people, and I'm very needy. And I used to look at that as a horrible, horrible thing, that I'm needy. And when I started doing psychedelics, and I don't do them often, and I don't do them recreationally, and I don't do them to get high, I'm doing them to try and really help my emotional well-being and to reconnect my help me here on the right words, but to reconnect.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're working with a professional, and there is lots of science and research behind psychedelics as a viable treatment method for all kinds of things, not only addiction treatment, but PTSD, whatever. Yes. Like there's a whole anxiety, depression, there's a whole gamut in which we have lots of research behind it. So yeah, I mean, please don't feel like you have to continue to justify yourself. This was a decision that was not made lightly. You talked to a lot of people, you weighed the pros and cons, and you've been supported by a lot of professionals on this part of your journey. And so I think I think it is important to talk about, in that this has been your path. Like you said, this is your path. This isn't something you're advocating for everybody, but this is your path. And this is how you have really been able to dig in and do this work. I mean, just seeing you here today and hearing you talk, knowing where you were just a few short weeks ago, it's a huge turnaround. And I'm not saying the psychedelics did that, but what I'm saying is that you're doing the work, and though
But
it's a tool to help you.
it is just like my gastric bypass surgery, just like going into Renaissance, and I will say that, I do believe that the psychedelics are helping me in the way of, so when I had my last session, it kicked me on my ass, right? It was like, I didn't even know what to make out of what I took away from it. And I think for almost 5 weeks, I was just, going, well, what was that? Like, and last week, I don't know, it was just like, boom, and all these beautiful things. And like, I have memories of of a particular thing when I was a child, but I know that they made me happy and I was free, but I never felt the actual joy. I don't remember feeling the joy. And for anyone who's old enough, I was downloading music to my Spotify account last Monday, and I came across 2 albums, and I put them on, and then I started listening. And I've got to say that for the first time in I don't know how many years, the first time in my life, I actually transcended or descended to when I was 11, 12, maybe 13 years old. The memory I have of this particular thing is going down to the basement in our duplex, putting on Trini Lopez's album on my father's record player, and singing my lungs out and dancing, like no one was watching. And the joy that I felt when I went to revisit this last Monday was the joy from seeing me as my most authentic self. When I was 11 and 12 years old, nobody was around. And I do have goosebumps right now, because I haven't experienced that type of feeling. And I only had memories of that's what I used to do. It was fun, but I actually felt the joy. And I do believe that it's all of it, but I do believe that it's the help of the psychedelics and my work that I'm doing with others that has helped me to, because a lot of it is to see things as they really were, as opposed to what I've now created in my head. And the other thing was I had a bad morning on Monday, and I went outside. I needed to get away from, and this is what I do as a person in recovery, is I sit in my own shit for as long as I can, because I'm so used to it, until I went outside 4 hours later and started just doing some gratitudes. And I did 5 or 7 gratitudes. I had my feet in the grass at work, and I was just sitting there. And then I wrote something to the effect of, I was a beautiful, loving, happy, lovable infant and toddler. I was loved and felt loved and remember being loved by all the neighbors, my great aunts and uncles, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, because I was one of the youngest. And then I just wrote that I'm sad that these feelings don't run over to my mom and dad, but I'm okay with that today. And that also, it was like that actual visual feeling memory of the love and the joy and the laughter, the giggling, right? And it's so, to me, that is really starting to change in ways of what I'm able to reconnect with. Because, I'll say everything sucked, but everything didn't suck, and but But when you're 61 years old and you don't know what you don't know, and so now I'm able to see. It's just like my trauma, I put down to it's all from my parents, and then it progresses, right? But when I had an incident at work yesterday and I really was thinking about it, and I, was talking to someone and saying, since I went off my medication, all this trauma response has resurfaced, and at least 80% of what I experience in trauma now and anxiety is at my job, in my current job, because I've been there 22 years. And that's a lot of 5-day, 8-hour days in 22 years that you're spending with people in what can be known as the somewhat toxic environment, working with people who have their own struggles, right? But there are times I still don't want to, I got into a situation yesterday because of pride, because of I'm not letting him keep getting away with this, but it hurts me. And that's what I need to remember, is that when I don't do what I need to do, when I don't use my tools, whether they're part of a 12-step tool or a recovery-based self-compassion, pick your poison. It's not pick your cure, pick your recovery tools. I often choose not to. I mean, I say to people I'm lazy. It's not about lazy. Maybe I'm just, I do believe,
Yeah, I
Molly,
want to
that
push back on that.
I am where I am. I am
Yeah.
where I am.
Yeah, right. And I want to push back on that too. When people show up and they're like, well, I chose not to pick my recovery tools. I guess I'm just lazy or whatever. I mean, I want to push back on that because I have a whole different perspective on that, right? I really believe when that happens, it's probably because you're in a survival state, right? Something has happened. It's dysregulated the brain. You're in fear, which means that the brain can only do one of several things or a few of several things, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, friend, fornicate, feed. And so when we choose, when we think we're choosing, quote in quotes, to not use our recovery tools, I don't know about you, Marla, I'll just speak for myself, but that's when I find that I'm actually in freeze. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not whatever. It's that I'm paralyzed. Something feels unsafe if I were to move forward, no matter what direction it is, right? It's like that damned if you do, damned if you don't feel. And so it's like the only thing you can do is just isolate and dissociate. And that's not lazy. That's
It's
survival.
not, and I need to say that I don't disagree with you at all, but that's where my head goes. And
Yeah.
you say it all the time. And my therapist says it all the time. And even the person I do my psychedelic therapy with, because he said to me one day, he says, what we choose to focus on is what we're going to manifest. I said, how can you say that? I said, how can you, it's like you're saying I'm choosing to be in the negative, and he said, no, he said, because when you're activated, it's coming from your subconscious. He goes, so the breath is the most important thing to bring you back to center and pause and breathe. He said, and only then can you make a conscious choice. He goes, and it's not always going to be the better choice. He goes, but you're not in that freeze mode or that panic spiral, right? So just so for you all to know, I got my first tattoo at 61 years old, and it actually is the Sanskrit symbol for breathe, because it took me this years old to know, well, about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, to really know what breath is. Like it's, the first thing we do when we're born is breathe. The last thing we do before we die is breathe. But breathing is a non-issue, right? But a conscious breath. And I did this because it has come to mean so much to me when I'm not in a spiral mode. And then when I finally can, come back down a little bit, I remember, oh yeah, I can breathe. Because trust me, whoever's listening to this, I still spiral. You know, the new girls, some of them will call me and say, oh my God, I ate this, or I can't, I don't know. I said, listen to me, 6 years, I still do those things. It's, yeah. So I just, what you and Clarissa and I don't know, Bitten, I don't know who's out there that I've only really been involved with you and Clarissa as far as this kind of, I call it new type of recovery, right? I call it recovery versus 12 steps, which is recovery as well. But the people who I have met through you, who you are constantly bringing, together, really teach me, the importance of honesty. I posted on the WhatsApp page, I don't know, some point this past weekend, I think, and it was, I ate an apple, and all I did was eat an apple. I mean, and I wanted to throw myself to the wolves, right? I know better, right? But it was just the frame of mind I was in, because I'll eat an apple sometimes, not on my food plan to eat fruit in the middle of the day, but I do, and I'm okay with it. Like you said, the green beans, I'll eat them when I'm, I don't care. But when I'm not spiritually fit, or when I'm not being honest about it, when I'm doing it in isolation, I start to spiral. So I wrote on that page and I said, I don't know, it's ego, it's pride. Like, what keeps me from posting that, right? And this is it. And I think I said it on Hope Week, is that all of the new people, the young people who are just starting out, right? I feel in my head, I need to be, and for my ego to be, I've got all my shit together. Look at me, I am, like Bill Wilson said, I have arrived. No, I haven't arrived. I've shown up and I go off and but I
mean, I don't know about you, Marla, but I don't know that I ever want to arrive. I don't know
no,
that I
I
want
don't.
that.
No, I really don't. I want to, because, and you don't ever arrive. I don't believe you ever arrive in recovery, because it's till the day you die. It's not like you learn it and you do it and you're done, because let's face it, life gets lifey and you spiral.
Yeah, but I think too, this is where, and I would love to have this conversation with you, and not necessarily do we have to have it today. I don't know that it's necessarily appropriate for this today, but I would love to have a conversation with you about like language around it. Recovery, there's something about recovery to me indicates some sort of finite timeline. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but when I hear the word recovery, right, like I think of like a search and rescue, right? We like make a recovery of a person or a body, God forbid, or whatever, right? Or we recover from a surgery, right? There's a timeline to it and there's an end date. And I really feel like sometimes there can be a stigma even around this idea of recovery, and recovery is forever. But you're right. I mean, you said it, like life gets lifey, like this is just life. I don't know, like at some point for me, I think recovery ended, and it's just me living life with my skills, and I stay topped up, right? I go back to my therapist on a regular basis. I have my people. I do all the things I've been practicing, but I don't know, right? But I don't, and again, it's not like I'm not trying to like start a war or anything, but it's just like a conversation that I think
but
is
I
important.
I can answer that for me, for you, like right now. So when I hear people say I'm recovered, I'm like, don't even talk to me. You're not recovered. There is no recovering. I mean, we're never done. If you want to use the word, we're never done. Or someone could say, I'm done. I've done my steps. I live this way. My food is perfect. I can read the big book inside and outside, upside down, backwards. I can quote everything. I can read Bill's story, blah, 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 blah. These are people who go, I am recovered. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you took 3 phone calls during my 5th step. You're not recovered. You'll never be recovered, right? And it's like when I think you and Clarissa had asked me to speak the first time for Food Junkie Summit. And I said, but I don't have recovery, right? And I don't remember if it was you or Clarissa who said, I said, I don't have recovery. And one of you said, I said, my food, you know, I still play with my food. I still, you know, my habits. But I, you know, and she said, but you are sober from your alcoholic foods, but now you have to go out and live life, which is what recovery is. So I think when I hear people say in any recovery group, any 12-step group, I'm recovered, I'm like, yeah, okay, so you're recovered. So why are you still here? Because it's never going to end. We're going to have to be using these tools, our therapists,
yeah,
for life.
I'm not arguing that people start walking around saying I'm recovered.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not something that's not a statement I would ever make myself either. But at some point, I stopped identifying even as a person in recovery. I love that you've transitioned to that, by the way. I think there's something about labels that can keep us stuck, and that when we, right, and a label of being in recovery is much more forward moving than some labels that, again, keep us stuck, right? But at some, like, this is just how I live now, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is just how I live now. Now there may be snapback, there may be lapse, there may be rebound, there may be things that happen, because that's life too.
Yeah.
Right?
Life gets lifey.
Life gets lifey, exactly. But I think it's just worth having the conversation, especially knowing how you're progressing through your journey, that, you know, there's room for it all. You know, I think maybe to speak to your point, and this idea, this new way of treating addiction, right, is that I just want to be open to that. There's room for all, just like your path.
Absolutely.
I honor and love the path that you've been on, just because you've been courageous enough to take it, you
And
know,
that's
and show up for yourself.
And that's something, I mean, when I was young, I smoked pot and I smoked hash and I dabbled in that white shit for a very short time. You know, I grew up in Montreal. I was a party girl. I drank. But when I decided I don't want to drink anymore, I just didn't drink. I never had an issue with it. Same thing with any kind of like cannabis, and you can tell I'm in psychedelic world, cannabis, not pot. But I that stuff never grabbed me. I don't know what my point was with that, but oh, I don't know what my point was with that. But I just know that so I never did any of that stuff. And when I even first contemplated, and it was a childhood friend who told me about it. We hadn't seen each other or talked to each other in 44 years. You know, she told me about it and I was like, yeah, but I was like, I'm never going off my meds. I can't. I was so petrified of what would happen. And even my GP, I called to update him a little while ago. And, you know, I started crying and telling him how the anxiety is just killing me. Even today still, you know, there are still days. And he said, I understand why you wanted to go off. And I understand that you want to feel and experience life, because when I on my medication, truly, I just was here all the time. You know, I don't need to be here, but I want to be here, right? I want to be here, just on a more or less steady, you know, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be times I'm like this, I might even be like this, but I want to be like, you know, like this, not like this, just like a normal person, normal ups and downs, right? And he said to me, I understand all that. He goes, but wouldn't you rather just go back on your medication and not have to deal with all that? And I literally said to him, are you in crazy? No. And Molly, you know firsthand, you were there through it all. You saw me every week, week after week, a couple of times a week. You saw all of it. And you know what I did when I couldn't sleep and when I had these anxiety attacks. You know what I did to myself, right? And I don't ever want to go back there. And I never thought I had courage. I never realized how, like I used to go, yeah, I'm so strong. I will say the F word. My new thing became as I'm resilient as fuck. But, sometimes I'm tired of being resilient. I just want to not be resilient. I want someone to take care of me. When I first started going to PIR meetings, which are psychedelics in recovery, and trust me, you want to talk about open and accepting and compassionate. And these are people who were on Skid Row. I mean, every addiction you can imagine possible, every emotional crash that you can imagine. I never, this is the first time, I mean, I was just sobbing, and it was shame, because I needed to get out there that I'm needy, and that causes me shame. I'm needy. I'm a needy person. There's nothing wrong with being needy or asking for what you need. But these are things that I'm learning with you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Oh, that just made me think of when you were saying all of that to your doctor, it made me think of, I just saw something on social media the other day and I sent it to my husband because he is, for all intents and purposes, quote unquote normal, and I have a history of mental health and other things. And it was like this content creator was like, you mean to tell me there are other people out there who don't fight their demons in their own head every single day, right? And it's just like mind blowing to those of us who have to show up and we have these constant, ups and downs and conversations and having to like consciously pick tools to use them. And then we go through the guilt and shame if we think we're being quote unquote lazy and not picking those things. And really it's just these are the cards that we've been dealt for one reason or another. And we show up in the ways that we show up, but you're right, sometimes it gets exhausting, but we always find that whatever, that oomph to get up and keep going again, right? So I so appreciate you having been here today. Before I let you go, because I always like to ask this question, even if I've asked it of you a million times before, do you have anything that you would like to say to somebody who's maybe brand new on this journey, or maybe they're in the midst of post-acute withdrawal, or they're feeling like, why did I even pick this? It was easier in the food. I mean, do you have any words for if you think about those folks?
well, I actually, I think I do. I shared, I think I shared, I was not in a good place a couple of weeks ago, just as you know, and I was in a town where it's about an hour from me, and it's just, there was all this, it's kind of like farm country, and there were all these like fast foods and the Dairy Queen and, all this stuff. And um, I had this thought, like, this is the first time in almost 6 years that I actually really thought, I can just have one ice cream from McDonald's or the Dairy Queen. And I mean, I didn't, but that was enough to scare me. And I want to say to anyone who's just starting out, or who's in the midst of, and who's, keeps going back to the food, and, or, doesn't think they're going to ever get it. And why did they choose this? This is really hard, but it's so much harder to keep reliving the misery of being in the food. How many times, I'm a lot older than a lot of these people who are new to your recovery, who are a lot younger than me, who've not been in long. I have experienced decades of what it was like to be back, going, and because I would do that. I just go, to hell with it. I'm just going to start eating. And that's what I did. I mean, how many more times can you lose 50, 60, 70 pounds and then just keep doing it? But it's just so much more painful. And it does bring peace for 5 minutes. Whereas I've had some days strung together where my food, I'm not going to use the word perfect, but my food has been super, super clean. And that stays with me. That stays with me. Even if I have 5 extra green beans tonight, or take a pickle out of the jar that's not committed, it's that sense of, it's that self-worth, that look what I did. It's a sense of accomplishment that sticks with you, right? Because we go back to the food, we take that first bite, and that becomes a day-long affair, a week affair. And I just, for me, I thank God every single day, while my behaviors around food might not be spot on as to what other people think I should be like, I thank God every single day that I have not touched flour, sugar, wheat, or grains, and have given up all nuts, all the stuff that I've given up after that, because I can't live with the unmanageability anymore, Molly. That's what brings me down every single time, is that even if it's just a moment of unmanageability because I've done something that I know is not nurturing to me. And that is so much worse, so much more painful than how hard it is sometimes to toe the line of, you know, of following what you need to do for your addiction or your issues around food.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so very much again, Marla, for being willing to show up and continue to recover out loud so others don't suffer in silence. And I think sharing our story, no matter where we're at on our journey, is powerful for somebody, even if we've never met them, even if we have no idea who and where they are. So I just appreciate you so very much and all that you do for this community.
you always have to make me cry.
I'm so good at it.
I just thought of psychedelics, and Vera hearing that are like, oh my God. But you and Clarissa, and just it's a whole new world, right? That's where my recovery really, like I always bring up Jose's name, and I'm just going to say this really quickly. I always refer to something, that he says, and I just lost my whole train of thought, so it doesn't really matter.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
Jose.
It's all good. There's lots of good Joseisms out there. All right.
There.
Thank
All right. Thank
you.
you so much, Molly.